All right, and welcome back to another episode of Who's Lifting Today. I'm here with Katie Orlic again. Katie, say hi.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back. Your first episode was awesome. Got a lot of positive feedback, so we had to have you again for yet another topic.
I am so excited. Very excited.
I am too. I want to talk about this topic for a while as well. But for those who didn't watch that episode, one, you're missing out. Go watch it. But
Yes.
Katie Orlic is a body neutral personal trainer, elite powerlifter, founder of EO Fitness. She wants a barbell in as many people's hands as possible, helping them enjoy movement in and out of the gym. Go follow her everything, which we will plug in the show notes.
Yes,
and go watch that episode because that was, I got a lot of positive people. Your audience loves you, by the way, in case you didn't know. They are big, big fans.
Honestly, it's funny how we were talking about in the podcasting world, like fans are like, they will wait for an episode to come out. I seriously feel that way with my TikTok audience. Like, I have the best freaking followers, honestly. Like, everyone is so dedicated, and it's humbling and amazing. Everyone's like, yes, you're on a podcast, I will listen to it. I don't have Spotify, I will download Spotify. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, which is great, which is awesome. And like totally earned because you put out like really good content. So like,
thank you.
It goes both ways. But today I wanted to talk about something that I think you'll have a very unique perspective on, which is like fatphobia.
Yeah.
And the reason we're having you on as well is because like your past experience, if you don't mind me like sharing your weight, is that like you were, 5'2", and you were
220-ish.
Like 220-ish, 220. And now where are you now?
I naturally sit around 156, 157, but at my first powerlifting meet about 7 years ago, I weighed in at 140 even. So, 220 to about 140.
Okay. And the reason I want to bring you, because I think like for some people who don't see fatphobia as a problem or think it's overblown, I kind of want you to share your experience on like what your life was like at 220 and what your life was like at like, let's say 140 or like wherever you are now. Because, it's just talking to you off the podcast, it sounds like there was some pretty noteworthy differences.
Absolutely. Me personally, I was treated very differently when I was in a larger body than I am now. Granted, I have become much more educated since, so it's tough to look at, both of those at the same time. Nobody wanted anything to do with what I was doing in the gym. Nobody wanted to know what I was doing. Nobody wanted, any help or anything like that when I was, 220, 185, whatever, as we started slowly dwindling down. And now everybody wants to know, oh my gosh, how did you do it? What's the secret? There is no secret. But nobody took a second look at my education or my hard work or anything, simply because when they looked at me, they saw me very differently than they see me now. They see the hard work. Honestly, I think I work very, very hard now. I think I was working a little bit harder, honestly, back then than possibly I even am now in the gym. But people don't see it that way. People see, oh, you're in a larger body, you're lazy, you're not working as hard. Then they see me very
when you were
now.
220. Were you a trainer at that point?
I was not a trainer yet. I was just starting my CPT through NASM.
Okay, so you were like in the process of doing that, and like, were you working out as often as you were now?
I was working out just as often as I am now. I think I may have. Right now, I consistently train 4 times a week. Back then, I was definitely 4 times a week, possibly even 5 times a week. I can't remember exactly. I was training just as much as I am now, and so that's what I'm saying with like, I wasn't a trainer. I was just becoming certified. So it is interesting to kind of look at those parallel to each other, because obviously, I am much more educated now, but my education has nothing to do with the fact that I lost weight. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. I say that to clients a lot of the time, actually. Anytime I do consult calls with clients, I do a little, for non-clients, I'm sorry. I do a little introduction. I'm like, I'll, let you know a little bit about me. I want to get to know a little bit about you, and we'll talk, and I'll, tell them my whole life story. I grew up an athlete, blah, 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 did this, did that. This is what I do for business. And then at the end, I'll add, I did have my own weight loss journey, but I don't really talk about it because I don't find it prevalent to my field. And that kind of breaks people's brains a little bit that as personal trainer, I don't find my weight loss story prevalent to my job. I am a good
Yeah,
trainer for much more reasons than the fact that I
right.
lost a little bit of weight.
Which I was going to say is pretty rare because most
Hmm.
people I know in the fitness world, and I want to talk about the fitness industry specifically, like use their weight loss journey like out almost like as their main credential, where like whether it's before and after photos, and like you definitely could do that if you wanted to, and I give you a lot of respect for not doing that because I'm sure you've seen how many times have we seen someone not in the fitness world loses a bunch of weight and then they start to
Hmm.
make a fitness page and they start to give fitness advice.
Yeah.
Maybe they take clients
Yeah.
legally or illegally, and then kind of use and like all from the built from they lost weight. Like that was like
Hmm.
that is the credential and like you
I
yeah.
I made a post about that probably a couple months ago, and people lost their booties over it. Everybody was, people were a little bit angry because I said, it was that trending TikTok sound, the you crazy crazy girl, that trending TikTok sound, and the text was just when somebody loses weight and then is now a trainer. Everyone was like, "Well, I would rather relate to somebody that that understands what I'm going through," and that's completely fine. I completely get that. And at the same time, being certified is the bare minimum that you can do for your clients. Becoming certified is not very hard.
It's yeah, I was gonna say it's like even
uh,
that's like a pretty low bar.
that is a very low bar. That's why that is the bare minimum that you can do for your clients. So just because you lost weight means that you know what works for your body. That does not mean that you know what works for anybody else's body.
Yeah, or for other goals or anything along those
Absolutely.
lines. Now, what do you think? I understand, like, because you were getting educated at the same time, that
Yeah.
it's hard to tell the assumptions where they came from.
Hmm.
What were assumptions that you think were made when you were 220 compared to now that have like
Oh,
gone away?
yeah. Absolutely. I think, I was an athlete my entire life. I was not new to the gym by any means. I was not new to movement by any means. Um, but when I stepped foot into the gym at 220, the assumption is, oh, she's here to lose weight, which I was at the beginning. It changed very quickly. The assumption is always, oh, she's here to lose weight. The assumption is, oh, she's here for the first time. This is her first time ever stepping foot in the gym, things like that. Whereas, yeah, maybe I was there to lose weight for a couple of weeks. And then, as we talked about on last episode, shameless plug for last episode, that changed very quickly. I very quickly turned to, wow, I feel really cool under a barbell. I want to do this forever because of how I feel. I was not there to lose weight. And yes, it happened. Obviously, that's what we're here talking about. But that was not the goal or the intention. The assumption was that, oh, she's here to lose a little bit of weight. And that was
Gotcha.
not at all what it ended up being. Or the fact that I had no idea what I was doing. And yes, that may have been true for me, but there are plenty. I think people look at you know our where we are now, and they perceive us as being at the finish line, and the finish line does not exist. Um, and they think, oh, you must be like naturally gifted. I had no idea what I was doing when I first started, honestly, with the barbell. I could not squat a barbell to depth. I could not bench press a barbell. I was not naturally gifted when I first stepped foot in a gym. And yes, so maybe when people are thinking, oh, she has no idea what she was doing, yes, maybe that was true, but there are plenty of other larger bodied folks in the gym that have a great idea of what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something worth mentioning as well is that like just because someone is larger doesn't mean that the goal
Yeah.
has to be weight loss or is
Nope.
weight loss. And I think like that's something that's important to mention as
Hmm.
well. What about like outside of the gym? So like the fitness world obviously like would have treated you very differently.
Yeah.
What about just like not to like name names, but like
Yeah.
friends, family, like things along like did those relationships change at all?
Those relationships definitely changed. I think that I was taken more seriously, as an academic once I lost weight. I feel that my story is not unique, but I feel that it is unique in a way because I came from an eating disordered background. So I was very, very, very thin at one point in my life. And then I was, large for my stature at another point in my life. And I was treated very differently. When you lose weight, everybody wants to know, oh my gosh, what did you do? Like, how did you do that? What's the secret?
Yeah.
And then when you gain that weight, everyone says, oh, what happened? Are you okay? And it's very different because when I was the thinnest that I was in my life, I was the most unhealthy. And when I was 220, I was making some moves to be healthier.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, the assumptions. But in my personal life, I am very, very thankful for the support system that I have. My boyfriend has been with me while I was at my heaviest. He is still with me now. And so I am very thankful to have, him as a support system. I don't think anybody in my life was outwardly judgmental, but of
Mhm.
course there is that, those underlying thoughts that people do have.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty rare to find. Well, except the internet. The internet, they're
Oh
floating
yeah.
everywhere. But
Oh yeah.
in person, it's very tough to find someone who like will just outwardly call you fat and shame you for it.
Absolutely.
Now, TikTok comment sections are
All
ready,
rules are
but
off.
that's yeah,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely, every single time. For people who don't understand, because I think fat phobia gets thrown out a lot on the internet.
Mhm.
How would you describe fat phobia to people? To people who like
Yeah.
maybe don't understand what it's all about?
Fat phobia is so prevalent in our everyday life that we don't even realize how many things are fat phobic. And um, before we even get into it, I think it's important to realize that we're talking about this because we need to understand fat phobia before we can change it, right? We can't change something that we're unaware of, right? So fat phobia is very simple in definition, honestly. It's just bias or discriminatory behaviors towards people who are fat or are in larger bodies. Um, and a lot of it, honestly, is subconscious. So that's the
Mhm.
really hard part is we have to make ourselves aware of it, and it's very uncomfortable. And you're not a bad person. It is something I think that is unfortunately been shoved down our throats, and it is our job to change it. Um, and if you're becoming aware of some of these thoughts that you may be having, it's okay. I think it's just most important that you change them.
Can you give like an example of something that might be fat phobic that someone might not
Yeah.
realize is fat phobic?
Absolutely. I think the first one that comes to mind, honestly, is um, ordering at a restaurant or going out to a drive-through, right? You see a larger person eating fast food and you're like, oh my gosh, they should not be eating that. And then you see a skinny little thing eating some fast food and you're like, oh, you don't even bat an eye. Or, you assume that somebody in a thinner body is at the end of their fitness journey and somebody that is in a larger body is not even yet started theirs. There's a lot of assumptions about society treats fat people very, very, very differently than they treat thin people. And like I said before, when you lose weight, everyone wants to know, how did you do it? Well, what's the secret? And when you gain weight, it's, oh my gosh, what happened to you? Whereas when I, coming from an eating disorder background, I needed to gain weight. It was, what happened to me, I recovered. That's what happened to me, right? Um, but yeah, just for a couple of examples of fat phobia.
Now, I want to ask now I haven't answered this question, but I want to know
Yeah.
your answer to this question, where people will bring up stuff like that. And the response that I've heard a few times now is like, yeah, but we should be telling them that what they're doing is wrong because they are fat and unhealthy and they need some tough love to put themselves in the right direction.
Oh,
Um,
I can talk about how tough love doesn't work forever,
Yes.
but I will.
So I have an answer to this question, but
Yes.
that seems to come up where someone's like, hey, we shouldn't like shame someone at the gym, or like we shouldn't shame someone like for what they eat. And sometimes I'll get a response that's like, well, that person's fat. Like maybe we should shame them so that they can get healthier and better, will be like the response. How do you approach that?
This is what we were talking about last episode. This is all rooted in diet culture, right? Diet culture is a set of beliefs that your number on a scale comes before your overall health, right? Just because looking at somebody, you have no idea about their health. Somebody's body is not a reflection of their health, right? Me, I am, people would look at me and be like, wow, you are a very normal looking person. I hate that right off the bat because I don't like the word normal. I got high cholesterol, man. Like, come on, you don't know. Looking at me, you'd be like, oh, you probably have perfect blood work. I got high cholesterol. Come on. But looking at somebody, You don't know. Somebody's weight does not determine their health. So I think that's the biggest thing to unpack there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised about that because I
Yeah,
think I'm gonna go into the boring data stuff for a second.
do it.
Whereas, like when we look at population levels, people who are in bigger bodies as a population tend to have worse health outcomes. But on the individual level,
Hmm.
that variation is quite large, which I
Yes.
think is why we'll take the population level where it's like, well, you're big, so you must have insert these things like whatever, heart disease, like high cholesterol,
Sure.
whatever. But when you talk to individuals and you get work done, like I personally, I'm sure the same has been for you, where I work with people in like who weigh in the 200s, 300s, like even 400s. They do blood work and they're fine. And
Yep.
there's like, and I think
Absolutely.
like that's something to say. Now, I'm not saying every person in the 200, 300s, 400s is like definitely healthy,
Hmm.
but I think it's safe to say that like kind of what you mentioned is that like weight at best is like a risk factor
Yeah.
but does not tell the whole story. And that's why when
Absolutely.
someone does have weight to them, you can't say for sure, oh, this person is unhealthy because they are this weight. We need more information. And that's why we have to, like, not make judgments out of the gate, like at it. Well, one, it's their health. They can do whatever they want. But also, even if you like wanted to make an assumption, you would need more data because there are people who like have excess weight, but
Hmm.
like really outside of that, like you look at their blood work, you look at their mobility, their strength, like there's really not like a thing that you can say like, oh, this person, like other than the weight on the scale, is like unhealthy. And I think like
Hmm.
that's an important thing to mention when someone's saying like, well, they need the tough love. Like technically
Yeah.
we don't know. Well, one, tough love is bad. But even if tough love did
Agree.
work,
Yes.
we don't know that it would work.
Hmm.
And I think like that's, part of like what is talking about fat phobia. And I think like that's the part
Absolutely.
that's missed is that fat phobia doesn't mean you hate fat people. It means that you have made assumptions about fat people that may or may not be true.
Yes.
And that's the part that I think is important to emphasize.
And just like you said, just because, you know, we look at people who weigh 200, 300, 400 pounds and assume that they are unhealthy, or we can look at the exact opposite end of the spectrum too. We can look at somebody that weighs, 100 pounds. We have no idea if they're healthy or unhealthy. You need much more information than that. I was the unhealthiest I ever was at a very low weight. And like I said before, I was making some fantastic moves for my health when I was at my heaviest weight. You know absolutely nothing. You know the tiniest fraction of the story, just by looking at somebody. It's almost irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think like I want to bring it back to the tough love as well because I think like
Yeah.
people in larger bodies. Okay, I want to make like a caveat here.
Hmm.
Um, the term fat can be used both as a negative and as like a weight neutral term.
Absolutely.
So that when we saying someone is fat, we're not like shaming them on the podcast.
No.
That like the term fat can be used in like a neutral fashion. So if I say
Yes.
a fat person, I'm not like using like a negative statement towards
Yes.
anybody who might be listening.
Absolutely.
Because not everyone knows that. So I just
No,
wanted to
they're
make
taking the
that
word back, and I love it. I love it.
yeah, and like if that makes them more comfortable, then like I think
Yes.
that's totally fine.
Fantastic.
But for people who, what was I gonna say? For people
Tough love.
who tough love, yeah. For people who, thank you. For people who think like tough love is the option, can you explain to them like why it doesn't really work the way we want it
Yeah.
to?
I can't stand tough love. And I also think that this cannot be a blanket statement. I think that tough love can work for a very specific group of people. But both Mark and I work mainly with beginners or people who are new to strength training or completely new to movement, right? And so a lot of times our clientele thrives off of positive reinforcement. If you're telling somebody who is just starting out, like, oh, you have to do more, you have to do more, you have to do more, that is super overwhelming. That is a
Mhm.
fantastic way to set you up for failure. That's a fantastic way. They are already having thoughts of maybe I'm not cut out for this. I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. This is, not my territory. I don't belong here. All those thoughts are already going through their head, whether they tell you or not. It's already there. You don't need to emphasize that. They need somebody telling them the truth, which is you're doing fantastic. You're making some amazing moves because that's going to make somebody want to, come back and do it again and do it again. Tough love works for, there's a time and a place for it. It works for a very specific niche of people. But my specific clientele, and I'm sure Mark's specific clientele as well, thrives off of that positive reinforcement for sure.
I fully agree. And I also think that like when we talk about the two divides between like people who benefit and people who don't benefit, a lot of people don't benefit from tough love. Like there is kind of the go-to fitness person who does, which is great. And like, that's fine for them. But like the average person mostly doesn't, especially because the gym is already kind of intimidating in itself. The idea that you would like shame them for missing a workout or not doing something properly, like this is, people always wonder like, well, why don't we have more people lifting weights or exercising? Well, it's like, you're not really creating the environment for them to want to be there. And I've said in the podcast before, it's that like discipline is kind of overrated. If you don't enjoy the experience, like you're probably not going to stick with training. It's very rare, and tough love is just going to be another one of those reasons why someone might not stick with it. And that doesn't mean that we like lie to them and tell them that they're a special snowflake and that like everything they're doing is amazing.
No, of course not.
But that we have to like acknowledge the wins, like, be respectful when there are mistakes made so that we can adjust them. And, this kind of comes down to like the people who are in bigger bodies, that if you're just giving them the tough love, like they're probably already uncomfortable in the gym just because they are probably one of the biggest people there. People in the gym have, pretty intimidating aesthetics. Like maybe in the fitness world, you don't think that, but outside of the fitness world, someone who is just like shredded with like huge arms and biceps and shoulders, working out next to you, lifting like 5x the weight that you're lifting, is intimidating. And like, that's, a lot. And I think if we want more people's strength training, we have to create environments where it's like, we have to be more welcoming to like the person who doesn't fit that mold, because the only people who are going to stick with strength training are going to be the people who naturally fit that mold.
I think I have so many thoughts on this, but two in particular. One, when you said, it's not like we're only saying you're doing such a fantastic job, sweetie, I'm so proud of you. Like there are times and places that the corrections need to be made. That's part of our job, right? And I think, if anybody follows me on TikTok, that I do this with any kind of form check that I do. My form checks blew up a little while ago, and I will tell you the secret to them right now. It is the sandwich method. Okay, the sandwich method never fails. You start with a compliment. First of all, I am so proud of you. You are doing an amazing job, because you are. That is the truth. Critique or correction goes here. Something that I think will, make this movement feel a little bit better for you is this. Again, I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to see what you do. Sandwich method never fails, y'all. Compliment, correction, compliment.
And the sandwich method lets them like, and I really like it because it allows them to, take some wins that exist there. Like you're not just doing the form correction. You're like, like Brittany's deadlift sucks, or like whatever. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like you're not using it for content in a way that's like, this person's dumb or doesn't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
You're acknowledging like the thing they have to improve on, because you do want them to get stronger, right? Yeah. So like, and part of that is like making corrections, but you're also acknowledging what they're doing well and that they're trying to improve. And like, I think those are all things that are like, we have to mention both, because if we just, if you just make content based on like, wow, this person sucks, look at this deadlift, like, what is this? It's like, that's, that doesn't help them. It probably doesn't help the watchers of that video either. I think that's like something to keep in mind as well. Yeah. How can people be less fat phobic if they want to be? So like, how do they start that process?
Honestly, I think this is so complex, and I don't know that there is a correct answer to this. I think that the biggest thing, like I mentioned before, is just becoming aware of it and challenging those thoughts, kind of playing devil's advocate with yourself, understanding that people's weight is the least interesting thing about them. If you're like, ask yourself why you're so concerned with somebody being fat. Why is it your problem, right? You don't know anything about their health just by looking at their body. They have a lot of other interesting things about them beside their weight. Ask yourself why you're so concerned is my first kind of maybe that is a little tough love thrown in there. But ask yourself why you're so concerned. Secondly, just being aware of it, noticing. You don't necessarily have to, for step one, act on changing it, but just noticing, oh, this may be something that I view differently for a fat person than I do for a thin person. Just noticing those different biases that you may have. And then I think lastly, just kind of playing devil's advocate with yourself and, asking, would I say the same thing or would I think the same thing if this person looked differently than they do?
Yeah, I think that's important to understand. Like, if this person was 150 pounds instead of 250 pounds, would I be saying the same thing? And that can be a sign that, like, maybe there's some mindset things that need to change there as well. I think one thing that you mentioned that was also really useful is almost like the flip side, is where when someone's larger, we're like super worried about their health, almost like unnecessarily. Yeah. And I think like the opposite is true as well. If someone looks a certain way, like if someone is thin and like has like, not much body weight to them, that we kind of assume they're fine. And I think that's bad too.
Absolutely.
Is that like, and like I've seen even like doctors will do this, where like, oh, like your BMI is like within the norm. So like, we don't really need to worry about like where you're at. And you miss out on things. And like, we're not saying the fat person is always healthy. And we're not saying the person in normal body weight is always unhealthy. What
that
we're
is exactly
saying is, everyone needs to check for themselves. Like, that's what we're saying. We're not like, we're just making no assumptions out of the gate. And then if you're saying like, is this person healthy? Like, we don't know. Like hopefully we hope they're healthy.
By looking at you, I have no idea. I'm not your doctor. I have no idea.
Yeah, we need more information. And I think like that's something that's like super important because there's just like a lot of unfair assumptions that are made. I even noticed this I'll share the weights that I've been at, where like I'm 5'9", so I'm also on the shorter side like yourself. And I've been anywhere from like 130 on my low end in high school to, I think I topped out at like 200, 205. And now I'm like 180-ish kind of thing. At the 205, I was in this weird space where I was too heavy for the fitness industry, but not heavy enough for the body positivity movement. It was like a weird spot. And I think that at the end of the day, what my weight was never like a good indicator on where my health was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think one thing that we should also mention as well is that like, we're not shaming people if they lose weight. No. I think that's like an important caveat to make as well, is that like, 'cause sometimes people, they engage in healthier habits and the side effect of that is losing weight. And like, we're not saying that's bad. Like, we're just kind of saying that like, healthy habits should be the focus. And then whatever your weight ends up being is what your weight ends up being.
The side effect.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Weight loss can be a side effect of the habit changes that you create. But to me, it should not be the main focus, because you can lose weight in plenty of unhealthy ways. And sure, maybe that'll work short term for you. But looking at the overall picture and in the grand scheme of health, weight loss is not always good. Weight gain is not always bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like a great way to end off. For people who didn't see the last episode, where can they find you?
They can find me. I am _EOFit on both Instagram and TikTok. And my website is eofit.io.
Awesome. Amazing. We'll put it down in the show notes for everyone to find you. You have a bunch of like different offers as well. So people can definitely look into that. But yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story about like how like your life changed. Maybe it shouldn't have changed, but it did change. And like letting us know kind of a little bit more about Fatphobia today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me yet again. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, always. Yeah. And thanks for listening to another episode of Who's Lifting Today.